Welcome. Hopefully you are all in the session, Be Outstanding in the Field. We're going to discuss RI professional certification. Just as a quick aside, the title came from my dad was an avid hunter growing up. And so he was always talking about how he was always outstanding in his field on all things he did. So that's where I kind of came up with the title. It's an homage to my dad. I'm Megan Heitmann. You've probably heard me talking at various times throughout the summit. I'm from Iowa State University and a member of the ARIS training team. My compatriots today are going to be Jory Weintraub, who is also on the training team and pretty full-time ARIS now, and Janice McDonnell, who I forgot your name for a second, who is at Rutgers, and the third person on our training team of our three-headed monster here. And did you want me to talk about Saj and Liesel now?
Yeah, I just wanted to add them. They're also part of our efforts with the training team, Saj Lichtenwalder and Lisa Hoteling. See Liesel here yet, but we're thankful to them as well for their contributions to our training efforts.
Yeah, if anybody was at the toolkit training earlier today, then you know about the amazing resources that that team has put together in the ARIS toolkit. If you were not in it earlier, I would strongly suggest you go back and watch the video in the on-demand section of the hub, just to get familiar with all of the awesome things that are available in the toolkit that can be used. So that's my plug for the toolkit. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about this afternoon? We have about an hour and a half. We have some topics that we want to discuss and get your feedback on. Our objectives are going to be to share what our options are for you for having a certification or credentialing, micro-credentialing program for ARIS for RI professionals. And we really do want to get your feedback on the importance of this and really on what you think of the structure that we're currently developing. So on the agenda, I will give you a pretty quick overview of the competencies process and how we came up with the competencies for what we're defining as the research impact professional. And then Janice is going to talk through kind of what we've decided or started to flesh out as far as various learning modules and what credentialing could look like. And then we're going to have Jory's going to follow up with a little bit of how that would also look at an institution-wide or within the programs like the ORIC program, how that we would certify those professionals as well. And then we're going to have a short breakout to discuss some of what you heard today. So I asked this question yesterday during the welcome, if you all were there, that created this word cloud. But we've also been asking the same question at the convening in our leadership committee, and I think probably even at the summit last year, Janice and I had this in our session. But how are we defining ourselves, or who are we? How do we define ourselves? What are RI professionals? And so this just gives us an idea of how people think of themselves with relation to broader impacts, not necessarily a title, like a particular job title that they might have at the institution, but just how do you think more broadly about some words that describe you? So you can see that things that we've come up with are knowledge broker, partnership coordinator, communication, the community engagement people, and words that came up yesterday that came up really to the top are development consultant, champion was one of my favorites, and collaborator, which I think in my mind, most people who I know who do broader impacts or research impact support work consider themselves a collaborator in the process. And as we were thinking about all of the competencies and the competency process and then certification, we do have to acknowledge all of the various places where these types of positions sit within an institution, right? There's no one spot for where a BI professional or RI professional might sit. They could be in a, embedded in a program who is actually doing outreach and engagement activities. They could be sitting in a research development office. They could be, one of the investigators themselves, right? Science communication is a popular area as well. So we just have to remember when we're thinking of competencies in the certification process that a lot of these areas are going to overlap. It's also going to be, duties that probably will not encompass people's entire position. But also there are going to be some skills that I think everybody needs and some where hopefully can be a little bit more picky and choosy. So how did we get all of this started, or where did this all come up with? If you look in the abstract, I think we strongly encourage people to go to the competencies session that was supposed to be yesterday. It did, due to unforeseen illness, it got postponed until next Tuesday. So I'm not going to go into detail on this. If you really want to get into the nitty gritty of how we came up with the competencies and what we're doing to kind of narrow that list down and make sure that we're really hitting the mark on what our final competency list comes up with, please come back on next Tuesday and listen to Miles talk about that. He's much better at it than I am. I will just say that we did start with a literature review of various competency models that are where in other areas such as outreach and engagement. We had our own that we kind of came up with for a broader impact professional. More specifically, we had, I think, extension, some other various items that came up with a list of over 400 competencies to start with on a very big, messy spreadsheet. We narrowed that down and took out redundancies ourselves as a team. And then Miles McDonnell from Michigan State conducted a Delphi study with a select group of experts in the area where they went through. I'm not going to exactly say the process because I went through it and I'm still a little fuzzy on how it goes, but they went through and kind of ranked what they thought was necessary. And based on where the rankings were, we either accepted it as a generally accepted competency or sent it back to them for another round, or cut it from our list altogether. And then once we had that, it got knocked down to, I think, 63. Is that right, Janice? 63 competencies total. And we sent that out. If you got a email asking for feedback last fall, we sent that out to do a factor analysis, a broader survey of our community to see if we were getting closer to being on the mark with these 63 competencies. And we're currently going through the results of that. And I will say that it has narrowed the list of 63 down into these smaller chunks or factors where they kind of lump them together. There are multiple competencies under each one of these 7 factors that are listed on the table. But I think that even the list of competencies underneath, there's going to be a little bit of working to narrow it down from 63 altogether to something smaller. And it really seems like throughout the factor analysis process and this whole process, we're getting closer and closer to what competencies will be needed for those who work in this area. Are there questions about that? I don't want to get like super in the weeds on this because you need to go listen to Miles, be much more articulate about it than me. But if there's any quick questions. Oh, Miles is here. Hi, Miles. Okay, I don't see any.
Megan, I was going to say Miles is here. He may not have his voice back yet. but he appears to be typing in chat. So if you have specific questions about the competencies, people could put them in chat and he could respond that way.
Yeah.
Yes, he can't speak, but he can type. So.
Okay. So moving past the competencies and thinking towards what a certification program could look like. This is kind of what we've been thinking about on the goal of a certification program. What would what's going to be the end goal of this? And it really revolves around building the professional practice, right? And building a community of people who haven't necessarily had their discipline area before, right? But it's really, some of our reasonings, I think, are on the side there, building the professional practice for these very varying groups that do overlap in some way. But I think we're also really thinking about and looking at legitimizing this as an actual field, right? Once there's a certification involved, it can hopefully give some status to your own position. If you go through project management certifications, those types of things, then it just gives you more credentialing on your resume and might put you in a better spot for positions down the line. And I think that's what we're really aiming for here. This is a fun little graphic that Julie Rizian came up with during our leadership meeting last week when we were talking about the certification process, and we really liked it. So we took it with her permission. But really, we're thinking about these concentric circles, right? And if you think of them with the analogy of, those who are in medicine, right? There's a very, very broad awareness level where you just have to be aware of something and be able to then maybe point them in the right direction, right? But you're not an expert in that particular area. And in this analogy, she likened that to a family physician, right? So if you come in and you have some skin irritant, family physician might not necessarily know exactly what it is, but they can point you then in the right direction. The next circle under that is starting to have an understanding, right? Knowing the thresholds of where your experience lies, it's going to be a little bit more focused. You will have knowledge in the area, but you also know where that sits within the larger landscape of all of research impacts, right? For what we're doing here. And that's where we're thinking the BI professional would fall, and where the certification would fall is in that kind of middle spot. So, you had something on your skin, your family physician sent you to a dermatologist. The dermatologist knows enough about skin diseases that they can probably help identify, right? And then even in a smaller sense, you can go into like the experts, like those who really, we are all around researchers all the time who really dig in deep to a particular area within the field, right? This could be like science communicators. It could be those who do K-12 outreach and engagement, those types of things within the BI professional realm. And going on with our analogy of the doctors, this would be like the skin cancer doctor, right? An oncologist that specializes in skin cancer. We're not necessarily looking to go that fine grain because there are other societies or organizations that can do a lot of training in more specific BI areas. But we do want to have people have a base knowledge and understanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about the societal impacts of research. So are there any questions on that as we're moving forward, kind of just the baseline competencies and where we started from? I'm going to stop sharing. Anybody have any? Jeff is raising his hand. Jeff.
Hello. This is more of a semantics issue, but I'm just curious how you determined practitioner versus professional.
We have not. We've tried many times, and I think it's narrowed down to essentially it's not going to matter. I feel like to actually define that role, but really to use the competencies that are relevant to both of those areas, right? Like some are what I would consider the professional would be like my position where I sit, I don't do any outreach, I don't do any research grants, but I sit in the middle and I'm, that collaborator and connector that goes back and forth between the two. And I have knowledge in the research impacts area. And on the other end, what we've always used is Janice, who is a practitioner, does deliver outreach opportunities and engagement opportunities for K-12. But she also has a lot of the same skills that I do when working with researchers, right? So I think we're tending towards now less of defining us as a whole and trying to like put us in a peg because it's not possible, or even to put us in multiple little pegs. But I think rather going through what are the skills and knowledge that are needed to kind of do this work no matter where you sit. And I don't know if Janice wants to try and answer that better, but we've gone a lot back and forth on it.
I would totally agree with what Megan just said. We've struggled with this, Jeff. It's really been challenging to put definitions on the various disciplines. So I would just say that this micro-credentialing that we'll be talking about is all going to be self-driven and self-determined based on the competencies. It won't be based on titles because there's just too many of them. We just sit in too many different places within our university structures.
Or even not even within universities,
Or
but
not
in other
even,
institutions. I
Right.
mean, it goes broad.
Yeah, I feel like we sort of got bogged down in the semantics of it, and it's easy to just spin your wheels on that for a long time, and then it's almost paralyzing, right? You can't move forward and just do it. And so I think our plan is to put it out there with the understanding that, like any other new program, a certification program is going to probably go through periods of adjustment. It'll be dynamic, and there will be tweaking along the way. And but the framework will be built around the competencies.
I'm going to pick up where Megan left off and talk a little bit about where our thinking is on this micro-credentialing process that we want to put forth. So in general, we're thinking about the credentialing or certification as being a nice mix between online kind of self-determined asynchronous learning and workshops and or online coaching that could help us kind of share skills and build capacity. At the end of the day, that's really what it's about, is helping each other learn what we've learned in this profession, help to define it, and then help to build capacity among others that want to enter this discipline in this field, this evolving field that we've been working on in the ARIS community. So in the most general sense, that's what we're looking for. And I like to liken it to, I'm sure those of you that work with early career researchers, especially postdocs, have worked with, what we call an individual development plan or an IDP. So if we think about it in that context, right, that we're self-developing our skills and our capacity, we're doing this as research professionals. So it really starts with that maroon colored circle that you see there around self-assessment. And those of you that have participated in the factor analysis, and I know probably a lot of you have, taking that survey and really kind of self-determining your skills and what your values and interests are, and contrasting that against what you want to build on, what things you might rank yourself low on. So we're thinking about it in that context, and kind of having that self-determination or that self-assessment be the driver for how you want to move forward with developing your IDP. From there, we would give you options to really look at the dimensions of skills that Megan just showed you, i.e. the factors that Miles has been working on with us, as well as CERC, our colleagues at CERC, our evaluation team that's part of the ARIS community. And having them work together to really help us look at that dimensions, right, of what really the RI work is all about and where those competencies fall out. And from there, you'd move on to setting some goals and coming up with a plan for how you want to improve your skills, which modules will make the most sense for you to integrate into your goal setting. And it'll help you achieve these goals, obviously. And then from there, we would move on to going counterclockwise, move on to exploring what modules ARIS will have to offer. And again, these will all be asynchronous. Think of, if those of you have ever done IRB training or youth development training, think along those lines, where it'll be very self-directed with simple kind of outputs, right, to check for understanding. So these would be at the basis, very basic modules that would introduce a lot of the themes and concepts that help us do our work. And these, again, would all be asynchronous. But we all know that we have to have human interaction in order to really solidify these skills and really be able to practice and apply them in productive ways. So that's where our workshops would come in. This would give you opportunities to discuss and learn with other ARIS professionals, including the leadership team. You'd be able to submit some work for professional certification. So kind of think of it along the lines of a portfolio that could be assessed within the community and kind of validated, if you will. And that, of course, would lead to ultimately in a certification process that would hopefully help with career advancement. At the end of the day, that's what we're hoping for, right? To further define the field, to help each other codify some of the key skills and tasks that we do as professionals. So that's kind of the general flow. Again, keeping in mind that none of this is carved in stone. Part of the purpose of sharing this with you today is to get your feedback and advice on whether we're on the right path or not. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So what I'd like to do is now share with you some of the modules we've been working on as a training team, and just give you a broad sense of what, how the bins or buckets we've put some of the material that we've worked on into. So I'm going to kind of show you, this is the big picture. We've got, if you go again clockwise, we've got the general stuff of what is broader impacts. We've got creating an effective plan, building partnerships, and then over here, evaluation strategies, building BI identity. And then finally, this dotted line box that you see here in the lower part is really about professional training. And what I want to do is just briefly go through each of these with you to give you a little bit more context for how these would be structured. So if we start with the blue boxes in the BI 101, which has been our BI 101 training that Megan and Jory have been offering for quite some time now. Really, the focus of that is, how is research relevant to society? Really picking up on those 10 different categories of societal impacts and case studies that NSF has been promoting for quite some time, and to kind of underpin what they mean by relevance to society. And I just pulled a couple of competencies from Miles's work that I think kind of fit in with that BI 101. And again, this is a work in progress, but competencies would look something like, I can understand the variety of different types of BI activities. I can construct a BI statement that aligns with NSF values, and I can communicate with researchers what is important to include in a BI statement for proposals. It's that basic kind of level understanding of what BI is and how NSF defines it. So there'd be several short modules that kind of breaking it into chunks. What is BI, kind of the rationale and history? Why does it matter? What are the 10 investment areas? Some basic overview or highlights of the PAPG. And then you'd have these two kind of application modules, if you will, that would help you sort through some of the tools that we've put in place that will help researchers understand what broader impacts is. And those include two basic things: the guiding principles, which many of you hopefully are familiar with, the ARIS guiding principles. And then the second document would be our rubric, which is to help researchers and broader impact professionals in general improve their rating of broader impacts. And those are both part of the toolkit. And again, just keeping in mind, this kind of thing over here in the white box would be the workshop or the online coaching sessions that would take into effect, where you might dig in a little deeper and review how the rubric operates to assess a plan, as an example. and kind of dig in and roll up your sleeves a little bit more on that to use that as you're applying your knowledge and kind of completing the certification. So, that's kind of a basic gist of how that information might be chunked out and offered in smaller pieces in order to achieve that micro-credentialing. Just to give you a sense of what the online module might look like, here's what we're thinking for the guiding principles. It might be 3 different topics, and then you would take a short scenario test of sorts. So you might review what are the guiding principles, how were they developed, and then how can researchers use the guiding principles, right? You would review this in an online module. And then you might take a little application test of sorts. You might get a sample broader impact summary statement that you would read through, and then you'd go to the checklist or the guiding principles, and you would check off for each of the following questions, check them if they are covered in the broader impact statement. So you kind of apply the checklist, make sure that it's been, the plan itself has checked the boxes, if you will, using the checklist. And then you'd get an online response to which ones you did or did not answer correctly, right? Based on our experience with that particular statement. And again, this is all basis of discussion. I just want to underscore that we're not saying that, it's a black and white situation here where whatever we say is the right way to do it. It's more based in facilitating discussion. As an evolving field, this is very, very important. And being part of that discussion would be the certification, right? And in kind of bringing that understanding to light, and again, building capacity as a group. So even though you're seeing red and green here, and what's right and what's wrong, I don't want to imply that it's a black and white, this is right, this is wrong situation. Again, it's about the conversation more than the outcome itself. So that would all be, sort of in an online format. And again, we would have those online sessions to bring it all home, so to speak, and complete the certification. Some of the other units we're thinking about constructing are, as we talked about, the creating an effective plan. That would include things like talking about audience and broadening participation and diversity, equity, and inclusion in your plan. Budgeting and timelines. And again, these very applied things of using the wizard to construct a plan from our toolkit, and also using the checklist itself. So these are, examples. Again, doing the portfolio for submission would complete the certification and bringing us together as a community. Our partnership unit might look something like this, understanding the types of partnerships and strategies for building good partnerships. And again, having that discussion together, basic skills and partnering. We might have one on evaluation, where we talk about basic skills and planning and development for BI professionals or researchers directly, where we look at evaluation, the different types, formative and summative, collective impact. What are those things? How do you find a good evaluator? Certainly we all get that question a lot. Tips for measuring impact, logic models and milestones. And again, the opportunity to bring us together for discussion. And then RI identity is another module we'd like to put together, creating a BI legacy. What is broader impact identity? What is return on investment and balancing intellectual merit and broader impact, engaged scholarship and community engagement. And again, that white box, pulling it all together, having a discussion as a community. I'm going to stop here and let Jory take over explaining those last 2 professional training modules, unless there's any questions so far for me. Oh, I see there's one question. Oh, Megan, you already answered it. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
How are you going to manage the scope between BI and NSF specific versus research impact more generally?
Yeah, that's a great question, and another one that we've talked a lot about. Our efforts to date have really sort of been NSF driven, mainly because they fund ARIS and they fund the toolkit work. But we are trying to keep an eye on the larger scope and really think about it more broadly with research impacts. We're hoping that as a community, again, as we start to clarify what these competencies are and what we really mean by these things, that we can pull in other agencies and start to have that broader discussion. But it's kind of in the box right now of you got to start somewhere, and you might as well start with NSF, since they're funding it and they're expressing the interest in working with us. Megan or Jory, did you want to add anything to that? Did I answer that right?
Yeah, I mean, you answered it exactly right, I think, and it just goes back to what we were saying earlier, to Jeff's question, which is that all of this is dynamic, all of this is a work in progress, and as the research community and funders move towards more clarity on what they all want with respect to research impact, we expect that our certification program will adapt and change with that as well. But it was another one of those things, sort of like the semantics of BI professional versus BI practitioner, where we went around and around and we said, well, maybe we should wait until it can be more all-encompassing, but you need to sort of just pull the trigger at some point and start, roll it out, start testing it and putting it in place, and then be flexible so that we can adapt as the climate changes. So.
Yeah, and I'll just make a quick comment that I put in chat. You'll notice on our larger map where it has all of the different colored Post-it notes, really the blue ones and the yellow ones that Janice went over that are at the top that are what is BI and creating a BI plan. They're very NSF focused and specific on what the BI of a proposal and what that actual activity might look like. The rest of them are not as specific to NSF, and that's kind of intentionally. We've done that because we understand that there are, you can have various societal impacts of your research at your institution, and how do you kind of help manage and foster that? You as a BI professional, or, any faculty member who wants to incorporate this work into their career for, the longevity of it. Those types of things can be more widely applied, but we did feel it obviously necessary to have the couple modules specifically focused on NSF and that BI criterion.
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we jump on? I can no longer see the participant list, so counting on my colleagues here to let me know if there are other questions. No? Okay. All right. Well, so just to sort of wrap up, follow up on what Janice was saying, she showed you this large chart which had sort of clusters of different or buckets, as she referred to them, of different skill areas that we would be developing the competencies and the training around. And there were two at the bottom, which we've blown up here on this slide. Janice, Megan, you can see the slide, right? We good? Okay. And these are a little bit different because the others focus specifically on how a BI professional may work with individual researchers to help them develop their proposals. Whereas this one has more to do with professional training, at the institutional level and working with BI professionals to help them build their capacity. So again, broken up into two buckets. The one on the left is building capacity of broader impacts professionals. So if you're familiar with the ARIS ORIC program, that's Megan mentioned it yesterday. It's the Organizational Research Impact Capacity Program. And that's where we work with institutions, cohorts of institutions over the course of a full year to help them develop and build up their institutional infrastructure for RI support, research impact support. And if you want to know more about ORIC, I'll actually be doing a whole session on that on the 24th, on the last day of the virtual summit. But ORIC is really focused on helping BI professionals, expand their comfort and their ability and their capacity to support research impact and broader impacts on their campus. And so, as you can see from these two buckets, it can happen by working with the BI professionals or by building BI support infrastructure at the institution. And so just to kind of break down the one on the left there, just to give you a sense of what sorts of competencies we might be building there. it would be on, how to use the ARIS toolkit that Janice mentioned earlier in this session, and Janice and Megan did a whole session earlier with Lisa Lansage earlier today on the Broader Impacts Toolkit. But the idea being that in order to become certified, you'd have to sort of test out on the skills involved in implementing the Broader Impacts Toolkit on your campus. So how to use the tools, how to, a practical assessment of constructing a Broader Impacts Plan using the Broader Impacts Wizard, using the rubric to review Broader Impacts Plans, things like that. So demonstrating sort of a competency in being able to use the toolkit effectively. So that would be one thing. Another thing would be the rubric that Janice mentioned briefly, which is a part of the toolkit where this would involve demonstrating a competence and an ability in using the rubric to evaluate and assess broader impacts plans as they're being written and developed in the pre-proposal stage. And then finally, something that's mentioned on there is conducting a landscape analysis at your institution. And so this is something that all participants in the ORIC program are asked to do. And I just want to tell you a little bit more about what this landscape analysis is. So all ORIC participants are asked or expected to complete a research impact landscape analysis at the beginning of their year of working in the ORIC program, and then to do that again at the very end of the year. And this landscape analysis is really a way of looking across their institution to determine what resources are available for them to use to support research impacts. And so they're asked to do an inventory, essentially, of things like what existing research impacts consultation services might be available at their institution, what web-based resources are available currently at their institution for supporting research impacts, what other professional development opportunities exist at their institution for research impacts professionals, and then who are some potential partners both within their institution and throughout their community, either local community or even national or international community who could serve potentially as BI partners. And then what are some evaluation and assessment resources available at their institution to help researchers do the evaluation of their broader impacts activities. And so this landscape analysis is a way of looking at all of these things and sort of getting a snapshot at the beginning of the year of ORIC and at the end of the year. And by completing it, it allows us to do a couple things. It allows us to see both how the landscape itself has changed, but also it's kind of a proxy measure of how their familiarity with the landscape has changed. So it may be that there aren't a lot of new resources over the course of that year, but it's just that in delving into it over the course of the year, the research impact professional has become aware of many more resources that they didn't realize. And the landscape analysis task sort of spurs that process of identifying those. So this is an activity that we've been implementing with the ORIC cohorts, but it's something that you don't have to be a part of ORIC to do this. Any institution that wants to build up their research impact capacity can do this landscape analysis process and make a determination of what resources are available. And so, that would be yet another sort of competency or skill that would be built into our training and certification process. Again, if you're, if you're focused on supporting faculty and other grant writers at your institution, this would be a valuable skill to develop because it would be an important resource for you to have. And so, just to go back to the way Janice framed this earlier, where she aligned it with the competencies that Miles has been working on, these institutional capacities or competencies are sort of, some of them are laid out here, and you can get a sense of the types of competencies we'd be aligning these two modules with. And so that will give you hopefully a better sense of the way we've approached this challenge. Again, the goal here is that we want to have ARIS be able to offer a certification program that that helps build the professional community of RI professionals and practitioners. In fact, one of the statements, one of the stated missions of ARIS, and this was written into the original ARIS NSF proposal, and it's part of our mission statement, is to build and professionalize the research impact, broader impacts community. And, you know, we feel really strongly that an important way to do this is through this certification process. So, you know, starting with all the hard work that Janice and Megan and Miles and others have done, identifying the competencies, and then identifying a strategy for delivering the information and evaluating it. This is what we're working towards, is this rolling out this ARIS professional certification program. So that's sort of the idea in a nutshell. What we were hoping to do now, since, you know, this is still in a formative process, is just facilitate some conversation among you. And we would love to hear from you. What we're going to do, I think, just to make the conversation move a little bit more effectively, is I think we're planning to put you in breakout groups for about 10 minutes or so, maybe, and ask you to think about these questions. And Janice or Megan, maybe you could put the questions in chat so that so that people can refer to them. But just put you in smaller groups and ask you to consider the following questions. Would a credentialing program like this be something that would be of interest to you? Would it benefit you professionally? Do you think you would be likely to participate in a credentialing program like this? What did we not explain well today? What seems still confusing to you about the process? What questions do you still have about it? Given that, you know, it's not a finished product yet, well, we're still sort of developing it, but we'd love to get your input at this formative stage. And then finally, given the setup of the modules, the 7 modules that that Janice laid out, the 7 topics and the way those would be structured, do you have any feedback for us on the structure? And does it seem like it's a setup that would be effective and conducive to running a certification process? You know, or if not, what ideas do you have for a way to make it a more effective process? So that's the idea. Before we put you in breakouts and ask you to discuss this in your small groups, does anybody have any general comments or questions about this that maybe the whole group would benefit from hearing before we move on to breakouts? Are there any hands up? I can't see.
It looks like Courtney raised her hand. Go ahead,
Oh,
Courtney.
okay. Yeah, Courtney.
I'm just wondering how this will overlap with folks who've been involved in some of the other initiatives like ORIC. Will that experience kind of, will you get like a pass on some of the modules through the
Yeah, so that's a great question. And, you know, as we're developing the certification process, we're keeping ORIC in mind, obviously. And the idea is that by participating in ORIC and the year-long training, you would essentially by default be earning the certification, right? So we will align the ORIC training and the certification with each other so that as you complete that, you will have then worked through all of the training modules and satisfied all of those requirements. Now, we realize that not every institution is going to be in a place where they want to or need to make a year-long commitment to participate in ORIC, and we're also still getting more applications than we can accept for each cohort, so we can't serve everyone. And so for those reasons, you know, this will also serve as a standalone certification process. So, you know, if you choose not to be a part of ORIC, or if your institution applies and isn't accepted, and you still want the certification, it would be open to anybody who wants to do that. But any institution that participates in ORIC, at the end of that year, their research impact professionals, you know, sort of by default will have earned the certificate that we would be awarding. Anything to add, Janice or Megan? Trent, you have a question.
Couldn't hit my mute button there. Will there be any like sub micro credentials that would be offered for, say, PIs or faculty at the institution to encourage them to self-develop?
Yeah, Janice, I feel like that's a Janice question.
It's a great question, Trent. And it really depends on if you think there would be a demonstrated need for it. Would we get enough people to make it worth our while? I guess, again, we were thinking we'd start with what we know, which is the ARIS community, but I think it's an interesting question. I mean, are you thinking that there would be a market for that PIs would want to do it?
Well, just if there was an institutional campaign to, educate the campus better about BI and services, if there was some type of micro-credential that they could earn, especially like new faculty, to get them motivated and engaged. That's what I was thinking, even if it's just one sub micro-credential that they could,
Yeah.
I mean,
could earn.
I think we would love a world where researchers and new faculty cared enough about broader impacts that they valued getting a credential or a micro-credential in it. And so, I think at this point we're certainly open to considering that. I think that would be another example of the kind of thing that, if we realize there's a demand for that, then certainly the credentialing program could grow and expand over time to incorporate that.
Yeah, they could be something more local. Incentives might be more appropriate,
Well, and I think even when developing the modules, if you look at them, the focused audience isn't necessarily the RI professional until you get to those two things that are circled in the bottom, right? Those are the ones that are more specific to what you would say those who are supporting researchers in the endeavors. The other ones are really focused towards what should be in the research and kind of best practices type thing. So I think it could be more widely applied as well. We do have a couple questions in the chat. Do we want to answer those quick before we go to breakouts?
I think so. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, I'm going to ask this one because I don't want to answer it. But there's a question on how will the success of this certification program be measured?
I don't know, Kristen's on the call, maybe we
I know.
So Kristen O'Connell is part of the evaluation team that evaluates all of our work at ARIS. It's honestly, it's a really good question. It's one that I don't think we have an answer for yet. It's certainly one we would work with our evaluation team to sort of develop that process. But Kristen, can I totally put you on the spot and ask you to share some thoughts on that?
I mean, it always, in any good evaluation, it depends on what the goals end up being, and we'll measure those based on what the goals are. So it will come from ARIS and the community of what would success look like. Would it be a process? It could be something that we get feedback from the community that this is useful and that it's helping them make the case for their profession. It could be that they're, it depends on what we want the goal to be.
There's another question, which I think someone seconded, which is this going to be free or fee-based? So the running joke in ARIS is that I'm the socialist. I want to give away everything for free, but I believe that the plan for this would be that it would be fee-based. And I think Susan may be on here, and we will always defer to Susan on these kind of calls. But I don't know, Megan or Janice, if you have thoughts on this. I think it'll be fee-based, but maybe with a discounted fee for people at certain types of institutions like MSIs and things like that. But Janice, Megan, Susan?
So
Susan
Susan,
said that-
she responded.
Yeah, Susan responded in the chat that it would be fee-based, but we try to keep the cost low. Obviously we have to think about sustainability for ARIS and various things, but we also realize we all work for institutions that don't like to pay for us to do things as well. So we will keep it low. That is the running joke that Janice and Jory want to give everything away for free. And I have a business degree, so I want there to be some sort of cost involved. So anyway.
So let's do this then. Should we put them, are there any other questions that need to be answered before we put them in breakouts?
I don't think so. I have 4 different breakout rooms. And
Okay. I know in big groups like this, a lot of people aren't comfortable speaking up. So our thought was, since we have time, we'll send you into breakouts for maybe 10 minutes. And
about that.
Someone put the 3 questions in chat, so they're there for you to discuss. But really what we just want you to do is sort of talk about this idea, bat it around, let us know what you think of it. And then we'll just pull everyone back after 10 minutes and, and maybe hear from each group, have them report out on thoughts on this process.
It's really, I just want to underscore, don't bail on us, because it's really important for this community to, to really weigh in on what you want with this. I mean, you're here because you're interested in it. So we'd really like your feedback and guidance as we try to shape this. Now is definitely the time as we move forward and try to turn this into something productive for all of us. So please don't hesitate to give us your feedback on those 3 questions. I think Megan also created some Google Docs if people are willing to record some of their thoughts, right, Megan?
Yeah, I created a Google Doc for each room so you can kind of hopefully caption just the highlights of each question and to have each question literally in front of you. So if you put anything in there, then that would also help us keep all that information and consider it as we're moving forward.
Are you
So
gonna
I will go
links?
in and out of each room and give you your Google Doc.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, we're going to go for it. I have 4 different rooms. Let me know if you have any problems.
See you on the other side.
Yep.
Janice, do you want me to, I see I'm assigned to a room. Oh, and actually I see Stephanie is not assigned. We should put her in one. Let's put her in room 1.
Oh, she's not. She must have joined late.
Came in late, so that's
Yeah.
my fault.
Okay.
No, it doesn't refresh, Stephanie, so it's my fault too.
I just put her in room 1. So.
Okay.
And I was asked to join. Actually, I can join any of them, I guess. So there's only no, there's a pretty good number in each room.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Do you think it would be better for me to stay out and let people?
I don't know. I don't honestly know. I was worried about the closed captioners too. Oh, we should pause this. Weren't we supposed to pause this? He's coming back.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button and now I'm invading your breakout group.
No, you're good. We're trying to
Panic.
get everybody back.
Trying to dismiss my little thing that was saying 60 minutes and I hit the wrong thing.
You're good. No, this is good. We're glad to have you back.
I always enjoy looking at the instruments on the wall behind you.
Oh, yeah. They're not very, yeah, they're collecting dust lately, but
Room 2 is refusing to rejoin. They're all still.
They're in a heavy discussion, right?
Yeah. Stephanie, is that, I can't tell what that is in your Zoom background. Is that the library, library or?
It is.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Very
trying to
cool
stay out of the way, if you can't tell,
Yeah, I can see it.
and being a little weird about it.
It's a very cool library. All right, I think we're all back.
All right. We were, I guess, hoping to hear from each room as to kind of what the gist of your conversations were and any major kind of consensus recommendations you'd like us to know about. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Should we just go in order? Room
Yeah.
1. Room 1 is Brenda, Courtney, Kristen. No, Kristen wasn't there. Stephanie, Travis.
Yeah, I was the note taker, so I'm happy to talk. Although if anyone else wants to jump in, you can feel free to boot me off the stage. Generally speaking, everyone had really positive things to say about this as something that's coming from ARIS, and they think that it will, help give us more of a shared language and a sense of community potentially within our own institutions if we can rally folks to go through the credentialing, and that'll just help with that community building and giving validation to the practice. Also, because many of us that participate in ARIS, we have this internal motivation to do so, but some folks just don't have the space in their schedule to do it on their own will. And so having this credential at the end of the process might be a nice carrot for that. And maybe give some merit to this work for the P&T process for any PIs who are going through it. The only challenge or confusing point that came up was just knowing that there are a lot of people within the community that have a strong body of knowledge, and some of the more foundational pieces of the modules might just might not challenge them. And so at what point where's the balance of like folks who've been doing this work for 30 years? Do they have to go through every step of the process? And then we were talking about like the train the trainer idea of if this really gains momentum and ends up being like a burden on the ARIS team, perhaps there's an opportunity to have like a super credential or something that sounds less dorky than that, where you're then training trainers to go out and help people through the credentialing process. And so it doesn't always fall on the ARIS training team. Talked about, once this gets going, maybe more certification and more advanced concepts. And that this would be another opportunity to be like another touch point beyond the ARIS Summit for community building.
Yeah, I like that last point. That's a really good point, because we're always talking about how to keep the momentum going, after the summit. And I like that. We've talked, those are all really great comments, and I appreciate you sharing those. We've talked, I think, about sort of two different levels, sort of addressing what about the people who've been doing it for 30 years versus people who are brand new. And so I think that's something that we've considered as well, as like a intro level and an advanced level. And something that I think is still maybe on the plate for us to consider. So I think those are all really excellent points. Megan, Janice, anyone?
Well, I don't know if Susan's still here, but she's always advocated for an alternate route. If the K-12 community, right? There's got to be a way to have points for your experience. So we just need to figure that out. I think it's, Courtney, to your point, your group's point, it totally has to happen. We just need to figure out how to do that. And then in terms of the challenging part of it, I think more modules will need to come, right? As we advance this field, there's going to be more and more discrete topics that we'll need to add to the 7 that are currently listed. So I totally agree with you there.
Great, thank you, room 1. Room 2, would you be willing to share your comments? That's Carrie, Kristen, Lisa, and Susan.
I can jump in. I did throw some notes on there. I don't know if anyone else in the group did. So we talked a little bit about credentialing programs sort of benefiting us professionally. I chimed in that I actually think that it would be really helpful for my graduate students and postdocs on my campus. That's sort of the role that I'm in now, as sort of this dual thing that they could be pursuing that is professional development that could potentially be beneficial to them, even if they go into academia or also as an alternative career. And then we did talk a lot about sort of cost and how that might be challenging for institutions, but could also put some sort of skin in the game of having, that responsibility. And then there was a little bit of talk about how faculty training would be good, but only if it's distilled down to something very short. And we talked a little bit about what the asynchronous modules might look like for them. And if anyone else from group 2 has additional comments, feel free to jump in there.
Excellent. Thank you, Kristen. Super helpful.
Anyone else from group 2? Okay. Group 3, Allison, Daniel, Jeff, Saj, and Trent.
Anybody from our group want to?
I guess I'll chime in with what I thought was my key takeaway from our chat, which was that for the first question about whether it would be beneficial for us as professionals, and we kind of had maybe 2 ends of the spectrum. One of them being like, what if I'm like really going far away from where I currently am, like moving across the country or something? It might be useful to just have this thing that I can show and sort of like says, yeah, I can do this, I'm a professional. And then the other side was more like very internally, where some of us might be at an institution and we're kind of doing this in a rogue kind of way where like, we don't have the external support, we don't have institutional support, and it's hard to find opportunities if they are kind of like centralized, if they depend on getting approval from someone at the institution. So something like this that could be used by someone to first get the certification, and show that they can do it and then sell it to their institution internally could also be potentially a nice thing.
Mhm.
I love the idea of a BI professional going rogue.
Yeah.
I picture Tom Cruise playing that role in the movie.
That's how I feel right now. So
Totally. I'm with you, Daniel. I'm kind of an outlaw too in my institution.
Yeah, and so much of the conversations we have within ARIS and at the summit and is around, like I said, professionalizing the community and recognition at our institutions that what we're doing has value. And so I think that's part of the thought process behind this is credibility. So thank you. Anyone else from room 3 have anything to add?
I was just going to say that, like Kristen, I actually thought about, I work with a couple of graduate fellow programs, and I could see using maybe not the whole thing, but definitely modules. And I would love to be able to incorporate some of that so that these students the ones that I work with really want to do engaged scholarship and are very big into research impacts, that they come out feeling like they've got a little extra boost and a little bit of a credential that they can put on their grant applications. They can put when they're applying for faculty positions, just to kind of raise their profile a little bit, obviously, as well as the skills, but they're the folks I want to see succeed in higher ed. So I want to boost them.
Yeah, and I think all the grad students that come to me and probably come to a lot of you and say, I'm almost done with my PhD in chemistry, physics, math, biology, and I just don't want to be a researcher. I don't want to be at the bench anymore. But what's my path, right? I could see this being really, a way of professionalizing the field for those folks as well, and being, something that could be a really appealing path forward for those folks. Great, thank you. And then finally, room 4, Anahita, Barbara, Jeff, Jackie, Tiffany, Virginia. Virginia, it looks like you're speaking, but you're muted.
Sorry, I took the notes. Everyone said a lot of the same things. One thing we did think about was that this could legitimize people working with other faculty members, especially if you're beginning. It gives you some knowledge that the faculty member won't necessarily have. I think for the people in our room, and maybe a lot of the people who are actually here at the conference, we've already been in the field for a while, so I'm not sure that everyone felt it would be a lot of benefit for us professionally to go through the program, or but we're thinking about trying to hire someone new, and I thought this would be absolutely perfect. And I was at another ARIS organized conference, and everyone in that room was new. They'd just gotten the job, but they didn't really know anything about broader impacts. And I thought this would absolutely be perfect. And that entryway, and I love the idea. I just had an undergraduate student who contacted me and wants to go into grant writing. And I said, she wanted to know what, I don't know of programs that I could recommend because I never went through something, but this is something I think would be useful. So in that sense, I thought this really helpful. I think people were wanted to know like how much it would cost, how long it would take. I think people have already said that. And we and what kind of a time commitment it would be. Some people didn't feel like they would be supported from their university with that. And I also wondered if the ARIS conference would be rolled into this and somehow would some of the workshops be available during the conference. I think that would be a great possibility for that. So I think anybody else from the floor wants to add to that.
Thank you, Virginia. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Yeah, no problem. I just had 2 things to add. I know that we talked about whether or not we as individuals thought that it would definitely be applicable to our departments. So to maybe have those conversations with your supervisor and or department head and see whether or not a certification like this would in fact be valuable for the position that you're currently filling. And then the second thing was in reflecting on the set of training modules, the feedback on the proposed structure, we were talking a little bit about after evaluating maybe the pilot group, the first annual group, if the certification does take place for 1 year, that you reflect on it via survey and or interview questions, different things like that, on what worked, what didn't work, and a plan of action to move forward, and whether or not you decide to go a different direction and develop new training modules.
And just to be clear, the 1 year that I was talking about is for the ORIC program. This is sort of goes along with the question that Courtney put in chat, which is how long do we think it would take a newbie to get through the certification process? I don't know that we have a good answer yet because we haven't built everything out, but I think, you know, it's going to depend, obviously. I mean, it certainly shouldn't take a year. That's not what we're anticipating. And it's really just, you know, how intensely you want to work on it at any given time. But, you know, I'm thinking, you know, probably more on the order of, you know, weeks to a few months, depending on how consistently you grind away at it. But the year-long thing is ORIC. And as I said, the idea would be that by completing that ORIC program, you would also sort of by default earn the certification.
So Tiffany and Courtney, my benchmark was around 3 hours per module. Obviously that can vary, but between the synchronous and asynchronous components, I think if it goes beyond that, it becomes counterproductive. You think about your average workshop is about, you know, a decent workshop is 3 hours, right? Our BI 101s were in that frame. So that's just a placeholder. To Jory's point, I'm not sure we can answer that with a high degree of confidence yet, but it'll be in that ballpark.
And to Stephanie's comment, as someone hoping to try to break into the BI community, large part of the reason I'm pursuing a PhD in science education is that I want to work with scientists in academia, and having the same letters as them will legitimize me in their eyes. I think that there's definitely truth to that statement. And, you know, I think that's, again, part of this idea of professionalizing the field. I don't think the idea is that you have to have, certainly not that you have to have a PhD to earn our certificate. But you know, it's all sort of part and parcel of credibility and legitimizing what we do as broader impacts professionals, regardless of the letters after our name. But, you know, ideally, I think there would be a point where the credential from ARIS meant that you could be recognized as a BI professional without needing to go through a 5-year PhD program in science education. You know what I mean?
So first of all, 5 years, very optimistic. I appreciate that. No, I didn't mean to imply that everyone needed a PhD, just that you all are in the field. As someone who's not in the field, that was the route I decided to take.
Yeah, well, and you know, again, my PhD is in immunology, and I certainly don't need that degree to do broader impacts work. I think that's one of the things about broader impacts is that we all kind of followed a different path and found a different way here. And I think that's part of what makes the community so dynamic, is that, you know, people with all different degrees, all different levels of education, but all sort of with the same commitment to broader impacts.
Are any of you familiar with the Campus Compact Micro-Credentialing Program? And did you look at that and see how it might complement or overlap this?
I saw Susan nodding her head. Are you familiar with it, Susan? I've heard of it. I don't know much about it.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a lot of research engagement. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. No, I'm familiar with it, but I didn't look at it as a model for this.
Okay.
We looked at a bunch of different models, Brent, trying to mirror kind of the professional societies and what they offer. So I have a Google folder full of different programs, of which that is one. So, and how they overlap, I don't know that I can answer well on that, but there are quite a few out there that, you know, we can kind of model ourselves after.
So we're just about out of time. If there are other questions or comments, this would be a great time to ask them or share them. I think this has been really helpful for us. You know, something that we've been immersed in for a long time and talking about it. And I think this has been a great opportunity for us to sort of take the pulse of the community and get input and feedback from you. So I appreciate everyone being an active participant in this conversation. Thank you for taking notes on your Google Docs, and we'll look through those as well. Megan, Janice, Susan, Kristen, anyone else have anything to add at this point?
I don't, other than my thanks for participating. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, there was a question from Virginia, I think. I scrolled up too quick. Stephanie, on where to find the slides and recording. The recording, it should all be in the attendee hub. The recording might take a day to have it be put in there. I think if you click on demand or the session itself, it'll be there. And we can attach the slides in there as well.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. And if we don't have the program rolled out by next year's summit, at least we'll be a lot closer to it, and we can give you an update then. But thanks to everyone for being here at the session and participating. We appreciate it.